What is the most horrific thing that someone has told you super casually? Someone I was in a relationship with previously that was a horribly abusive narcissist, never physical with me, told me he once considered strangling an ex-girlfriend to death. He acted pretty aloof about it, then backtracked and said he never felt close enough with someone to tell them that, and acted like it was so hard to tell me that when it just flew out of his mouth like a pizza order. That's part of their manipulation. But it's something you never forget. I've been gone 5 months, and I have nightmares about getting strangled. It's pretty fucked up. I usually work with kids in facilities. We had a boy come in, about 10 years old. They had him on a 72-hour hold because he threatened to kill a classmate at school. We got those often, and most times it was just a kid being a kid and ends up being caught, and we are forced to treat it as real. No big deal. Well, it actually was a huge deal. He would keep fidgeting in his chair and on the ground. I'd always say, Tom, try to keep still, okay? Or Tom, if you are getting restless you can walk around the table if that helps. At lunch I was asking him how he was doing, and he said it's weird to sleep all by myself. Some families bed share with siblings, so this wasn't way out of line. I said, oh, do you sleep in bed with your sister? And then he dropped this on me. No, daddy likes to sleep in my bed, but I don't like it, because it always hurts my bottom. Now I'm like, fuck in my head. They tell you to not express emotion if the kid isn't so as coolly as I could. I said, oh, why is that? And he told me all about how daddy playing a poking tickle game, but he can't show me what it is, because he's not allowed to tell anyone. Guys, I wanted to cry. We ended up having to take him to the emergency room for an anal exam, which confirmed his dad had been anally raping him for so long that he couldn't remember a time it didn't happen. That's only one of many horrible stories I have from that job. And now I need a drink. Just remembering it makes me feel sick and shaky with anger. I hope his dad is slowly tortured for the rest of his life. I was sitting in a pub with an acquaintance, so friend of a friend sort of thing. He was always a bit quiet. I think the rest of the group were either at the bar or toilet, not sure. Out of the blue he says, I killed someone last month. Okay. He was a pedophile, had been abusing my younger cousin for years. So my elder cousins and me shot him, buried him in a shallow grave. I asked why he was telling me this, and he looked me in the eye and said, I'm not sure if we did the right thing, but I had to tell someone. And it was never mentioned again. I called my cousin, and at the beginning of the convo I asked what she was doing. She said, oh, just standing at the counter looking at my hand. I thought it was a little weird, but my cousin is a little weird, so I forgot about it. Anyway, half an hour later she goes, the blood has now stained my shirt. I think I should hang up and go to the I was like, what? So she replied, oh, I stabbed myself with the meat cleaver 10 minutes before you called, and the knife is still in my hand. I'm fine, but my shirt is now ruined. A guy I worked with said that in the late 80s he lived with 5 other guys in an apartment in New York. Sometime after the HIV test is developed, all of the roommates agree to get tested. Apparently the results were mailed to them. Basically, one guy got the mail and opened everyone's test. In so doing he finds out one of the roommates has HIV. He shows the test results to every roommate except the guy who is HIV positive. Then they destroy the test results. They all pack their stuff and abandon apartment and the HIV positive guy. None of them ever spoke to the HIV positive roommate again. They never told him his test results. The guy I worked with laughed so hard telling me this story. It's fucked up. The guy I worked with had no remorse or a second of compassion even 30 years later, and knowing the HIV positive roommate probably died. Who knows how many people the unknowing HIV positive guy may have unknowingly transmitted HIV to before he had serious symptoms. JP, if you're reading this, fuck you. Heartless bastard. I was joking with an acquaintance once, and he told me that he was going to move in a couple of months. We weren't really close enough for me to care, but I asked him why out of pure curiosity. In the same breath, without hesitation, he told me that he had been in the foster system all his life despite knowing his biological dad personally. His dad was some big businessman in New York City and didn't have the time to raise a son. He had been with 11 different families in 15 years, and in each one he prayed he'd get adopted. It never happened. The family that he was with at that moment told him they were thinking about adopting him, but changed their minds last minute. Now he's in a constant state of expecting to move because he just assumes that no one will ever want to adopt him. If you're reading this, I hope you're doing good, Michael. When I was in college, there was this guy who would hang around me sometimes that seemed just a little bit off. But he was nice, and we both had similar interest, so we hung out. One day, after I hadn't seen him for weeks, he tells me it's because the police were interviewing him. He tells me this story. Him and his two friends were in the woods, shooting a .22 pistol. Friend #3 tries to fire, and it doesn't go off. Friend #3 looks into the barrel to check the gun. The gun then goes off, firing the round in there, and then the next round, shooting him twice in the face. You read that correctly. 3 guys went into the woods with a .22 pistol, 2 walked out, and the third was shot twice in the face and died. Anyone who knows anything about guns knows this is basically impossible. But since Guy and friend #2 both had the same story, and the cops had no way to prove otherwise, no charges were filed. I stopped hanging out with that guy. Forever. I was on a date with this girl, and we drove by a fast food joint and a shared parking lot. She deadpan said, "My mom used to park here and shoot heroin with her BF while me and my brother sat in the backseat." Me, oh, wow. I was a heroin baby my mom was using while she was pregnant. Me, oh. I once asked my grandfather, "How you doing, grandpa?" And he said, "Not good, not good. I moved my bowels 3 times already today. Went to the doctors, and they put a tube in my penis." Should I mention we were at a family funeral? My boyfriend and I were hanging out with an old friend of my boyfriend's, and discussing how a girl we sort of knew was raped by this guy we sort of knew / she was friends with. My boyfriend and I were talking about how horrified and disgusted we were, and his friend goes, "I mean, he just had sex with her while she wasn't conscious. That's not really rape. I do that to my girlfriend all of the time." We immediately told him to leave and cut off that friendship. If you join the military, there's always be that one guy / girl in your squad or platoon, the soldier who's about as bright as a bag of hammers and or you'll swear their parents must be cousins or something. In my previous unit, that soldier also happened to be something of a Christian zealot with some really fucked up ideas about how the world should be. And I wish it was just as simple as thinking the earth is only 6,000 years old. That soldier was straight up fucking delusional. So what did they say during the deployment that was so scary? Killing Iraqis isn't a sin because they aren't Christians. Dear Department of Defense, please for the love of fuck start administering psych evils at MEPS. People like this do not need to be given loaded firearms and uniforms. That her dad was a sheriff, raped her on the regular, and she had many miscarriages because of it. I think it was our 3rd day working together. We had a shift alone, and she was a talker. Usually she spouted nonsense, but she busted the above out, like she was telling me how her dad taught her to ride a bike. I was speechless, and kept my head down in my work, while she started on another topic. I later learned she was a pathological liar, but I had never really heard rape mentioned casually, and it threw me off. I was a paralegal. My boss was a landlord on the side, and rented a place to a crack dealer who trashed the place on his way out. My boss was told that he needed a hazmat team to clean it. Instead he sent me, and I had to provide the gloves and garbage bags. He was paying me an extra $20 a day and told me that I should be grateful because it would help with my $20,000 of collective debt. That was the moment that my self-esteem and ambition in life died. I haven't seen it since. When I was 20 something back in the 90s, I was sitting on the front steps of my condo waiting for my sister's husband to pick me up. Nice old fellow, a tenant of my building, sat down next to me. His first sentence he'd ever spoken to me was, "Did you hear that they are taking my testicles off on Thursday?" I responded that I had not. He continued, "Yep, don't use them much anymore after the missus died." Mercifully at that moment my brother-in-law drove up. Oh, I accidentally did this recently. I was telling my boyfriend about how this girl I knew stalked me in October/November of last year. I hardly knew her, but she sent me some really aggressive and threatening messages, and would get really angry if I didn't answer her immediately. She actually non-consensually kissed a friend of mine and harassed another. After a few days of this, I cut contact with her and blocked her. After telling my boyfriend all this, he said something like, well, if she tries anything like that again, you could beat her up. And I just said, oh, no need to worry about that. She's dead now. Obviously complete shock on his face. I really should have lead up to that better. Basically I found out she had passed away in February for completely unrelated reasons. It really shook me up for a few days, but like I said, I didn't really know her. Of course, saying it the way I did was pretty callous of me.